The next library is the go-to library for querying your HTML data. Let's say you're building a web crawler. What is a web crawler or web scraper? There are certain scripts, there are certain applications that go to URLs, and then they interpret that data, they store it, they index it in the database, they do something with that data. So you can use the jQuery syntax, the good old familiar jQuery from the front end, on your backend to get to some element, or maybe you're performing some testing. For the testing on the backend, it's nice to use this jQuery syntax. You want to get some element, you want to compare what is the label of a certain element, what are the text inside of that, what is the structure, what are some attributes. Cheerio is the way to go. NodeEarth. So NodeEarth is my favorite library, and it's very mature. It's tested by myriads and myriads of applications. I do not recommend using Passport or EveryAuth or any one of those fancy OAuth integration libraries. Why? Because oftentimes they don't do what you need. It's better to just use NodeEarth. What it gives you a few methods how to create a signature. You can put it into an HTTP header, and then it also gives you a few requests. If you want to do those, if you want to use those, you can use those, or you can create your own request after getting that signature for OAuth. It supports OAuth 1 and OAuth 2 as well. You can implement 3-legged authorization, authentication, or any other strategy. Passport. So Passport is one of those bigger libraries. I do not recommend using it, but if it works for you, that's fine. What is the difference between Passport and NodeEarth? So with Passport, you basically install Passport, and you install a strategy, for example, Facebook or Twitter strategy or Google strategy for Google API. And you put your API keys, and then you configure the Passport to work with Express or any other framework. And that's it. In theory, it should work. I oftentimes have more problems with Passport, but if it works for you, a lot of developers, they prefer to use Passport. That's great too. My job is to give you this tool, and so you have the full tool chain. Yarks. So Yark, it's a nice module to work with command line arguments. So let's say you're building a command line script that will do some deployment, or it will do something else. Maybe you're building your own version of Webpack, which is precisely tailored to your application. So yarks, that's the library to work with those command line arguments, to access them, to have a beautiful help menu, to basically have that support easier, because process.argv, it's just low-level access, and it's not that nice to work with. Shell.js. So Shell.js, that's a tool or library. So it's a library to build scripts, to run shell scripts, typically bash scripts, and it will give you nice methods, but it's also cross-platform. So it will work, at least in theory. I'm not a Windows user. It will work on Windows. So instead of you calling child process.exec with all those bash commands, use Shell.js to create a folder, to run some commands, to delete a file. So all those commands, they're supported in this library. So from within your Node code, you can execute these shell commands. Maka. Maka is my favorite, and it's the most popular testing framework. It's full of features, it's full of reports, the language is nice, the language is compatible with Jasmine and Jest, two other popular choices, good choices. Maka is the testing framework. It's the testing framework of Node.js. Async. Async is my favorite library to work with asynchronous code. Every time I need to run a lot of functions concurrently or sequentially, I would use async. Async will allow me to create an array, and then I just pass that array and I have a callback for the final execution. So async works nicely. There are a couple other libraries alternative to async, so use one of them. One is called NeoAsync, another called NAsync. Use async or some of those alternatives, but definitely is a good way to run your code. Promises, they might have, especially promise.all, it can have some of the functionality of Async, but still, Async has so much to give you. So in any medium-sized or large-sized project, Async, that's a way to go. Concurrently it's now becoming my favorite tool. Why? Because when I building front-end application and the back-end application in one repository, so I have a server and my front-end code, I would need to start Webpack, maybe Webpack development server or Node static, and then I would also need to start the API, or even with just Node static and Webpack. So that's 2 commands and they need to run concurrently. And then with the API server, that's a 3rd command. Why Webpack needs to run concurrently? Because I'm developing, so I would launch Webpack in the watch mode for it to watch all the file changes. So that's why concurrently it's a great tool. I can just install it, and then in my npm scripts I can tell concurrently, hey, run those 2 or 3 processes at the same time, and I will just do npm start, and they're all running in parallel. They're running concurrently. You can also use this tool from within your Node code, so it also works as the dependency, not just as the command line tool. So let's take a look at the Maka example. Maka express test, so I'm just specifying the file, Maka express.test.js. Typically the test files, they would have a word test in the file name. And you can see I have a lot of errors. So this is how Maka can run your testing. This is an example of integrational testing. So I'm testing my RESTful API by making requests to it over HTTP. I'm not mocking it. I'm not importing my Express app and then faking those requests. Those are real requests. And then you can see in the second tab, MongoDB, those are the database tries to talk with MongoDB. Okay. So Maka is the most popular testing library. Some of the libraries listed, such as Webpack and Maka, they can be installed globally. Okay, so how to install globally? It's -G. But I believe it's an anti-pattern because the local installation has so many benefits over the global. Yes, you are taking up more space, but the space is so cheap right now, we don't really worry about that. With the local installation, you can run multiple versions of the same tool for different projects. All you have to do is just specify it and then specify it in package.json. And then if someone wants to use the same project, collaborate on your project, they don't need to worry that they have a different global tool. The tool will be in package.json and it will be installed locally once they do npm install. So they would have 0 conflict. Of course, there are many alternatives. For example, for Axios, there is request and super agent. They are super popular with HTTP libraries, but I'm giving you the latest, the most modern options, and the most popular as well. So it's either the most popular, maybe it's a little bit older, like Maka, it's definitely newer, and it has certain advantage for the React code, for the React components, or they're newer and they support wonderful things such as promises and async await. This is the case for Axios, request, and super agent. They've been around for a while. There are more projects with them, but Axios is the way to go. So obviously I cannot list all of them, and I don't want to overwhelm you. I would give you the most bang for your time invested in this course. So I'm giving you the best tools. And then go ahead and experiment. Use something else, use alternative, but first get this toolchain under your belt so you have the best tool for the job, whatever that job is, either making HTTP requests or creating tests.